excited to just introduce this quick panel, and then I'm going to let you go into your own background. But I'm Vishvas Garg with AbbVie, and Mark Dunham with Managing Director and Chief Patient Officer with Indie Healthcare Consultant. But let me have you both just give a little bit more background on yourself before we jump in.
Perfect. Since everything starts with patients, Mark, why don't you go ahead first?
Oh, you're such a schmoozer. So I'm Scottish, as you can hear, living in England, trying to teach a bit of culture to the English and failing miserably, although I have increased the exports of whiskey, which is great. I'm a pharmacist by profession, but no longer by practice. I've been a management consultant for the last 20 years, embarrassingly, but I'm a proud patient advocate. I'm a patient with type 2 diabetes. I'm delighted to say currently in remission or reversed, and sort of very much into, as Vishvas has said, and taking the wind out my sails in a lovely way. It's let's start with us. Let's co-create with us. And I think that will be a theme for the next few minutes that we have together, saying, don't do to us or for us, please do with us. And I'll touch on to maybe even taking that model further as we progress our little discussion. So thank you for the opportunity. And Vishvas, thank you for inviting me to join your panel as well. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure and honor to have this panel with you, Mark. Vishvas Garg, I lead the dermatology team for health economics and outcomes research at AbbVie. Been here for 10 years, almost a whole decade now, can't believe it. I'll keep it short since we have brief time. We can dive into the next one.
Awesome, thank you so much. It's great to hear the details of your background. Let's just ask the first question. What is real world evidence, and what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question for us to begin, right? And since we are talking about digital health a lot, let me maybe use a definition that pertains to digital health. Digital health does not have a consensus on what does it mean. Depending on who you are, what you do, everyone thinks of it in a different way. I consider myself an expert in real world evidence, and I will define it the way I think it makes sense to me, which is I think digital health is a paradigm shift for leveraging real world evidence in healthcare decision making. I realize that's a big statement, but that's how I think about it. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
I think Lisa's disappeared for a moment.
Yeah, Mark, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think you're, what is digital health, and I think you're quite right. It's sort of a little bit amorphous at the moment, and in any discussion, I think we need to start with an agreement on definitions, even where those definitions may not be accurate, regulatory approved. I think if we all sort of say, well, we're talking about the right stuff, and to me, digital health is telehealth, is being able to do remote consultation. Digital health is the apps that people use. I don't personally myself, but I wonder if digital health and real world data also includes, and I won't advertise any particular brand, but the wearable that I have that monitors my steps, or the pedometer that is in my phone. And some discussions I've had both with you and with other pharma colleagues is, where do we define real world evidence? And I'm a big fan of patient generated or citizen generated data. And with that comes issues of, it's not medically regulated. My question would be, what does medical standard, what does medical grade mean? Let's not put accessibility and quality up against each other. Let's maybe open things up a bit, and maybe let's make our definitions, without being dangerous or too risky, as broad as we possibly can, so that patients and citizens can contribute rather than be, dare I say, passive recipients.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, so do we kind of touch around how patient generated data can continue to contribute to that? And then maybe just roll into.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll briefly touch on that. I mean, again, terminology, and Vishvas is an expert in this. I'm thinking, what's real world evidence? If I sat at my dinner table tonight and said to my kids, I just did a conference on real world evidence, they'd be like, or real world data, or even the term health data. So again, there's something about, we have to be very careful, back to the point about definitions, about what our language is. What I personally don't want to see is that we create yet another professional lexicon that creates a barrier between us and the people that would either be able to contribute and or benefit most from what we're doing. So, even PGD, or patient-generated data, has its own terminology now. But there's something, as I said earlier, about could we, as I said, maximizing benefit and minimizing risk and ensuring safety. Could we make sure, please, that we really can have citizens contribute data? I think one of my big take homes is I've had 3 conditions over the years. I had anxiety and depression, diabetes, which, as I said, is in remission, and some hepatology issues. And despite living in the north of England in a place called Salford, which has a shared care record, the only real shared care that happened was with my wife, who was my carer, where she joined what the psychiatrist, the endocrinologist, and the hepatologist were saying, despite it all supposed to be in some sort of shared care record. So there's something about the power of caregivers, the power of people, especially with technology now, bearing in mind health, digital literacy, and data poverty. But there's something about, give us the power, give us the ability to do stuff. Let's not wait for the center to do it to us or for us.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Mark, I think what you described is a great example of how a patient thinks about the different challenges we have today around real world data and generating real world evidence from it. If I can provide my spin of a scientist here for how I look at exactly the same issues. So I think something you touched upon was interoperability or lack thereof, right? That is one big challenge we have in the space of real world data today. In fact, not just lack of interoperability, but also lack of privacy and security from a patient's point of view. In US, just last year, the data breaches impacted more than 45 million patients through their medical records. I think all of those topics are equally important for the patients, right? And then to your point of, can I generate my own evidence from it? I think this is where we go into the limited scientific capabilities we have today, whether that being just not having high quality, deep real world data for us to generate the insights we have to not being able to test causation at scale, to simply lack of awareness around key stakeholders on what is even real world evidence, right? Those are some of the hot topics that in our field we think about a lot. If don't, we should think about a lot, because these are the key challenges we need to solve for if we were to accelerate and make that paradigm shift to not only advance real world evidence, but to also advance digital health. Because I am of the opinion that in the future, real world data and real world evidence will be the backbone of digital health.
Well, that's awesome. As we're wrapping up here, just one last question that is often asked is, how can I trust the system not to abuse my data? So as we're kind of thinking about this, I'm sure I see from the smile that you hear that often.
Yeah. So this is my own personal belief, and I welcome any debates on this topic. But for me, healthcare cannot be patient-centric until patients own and control their own data. I think on day one there was a agenda topic around this same issue, but I believe that in the long run, each patient should control their own data, and at least in US, we are starting to see some of that. For example, in 2020, there were 2 rule changes in ONC that allowed for patients to gain more control of their data. Just earlier this year, the period when every payer has to basically give a digital copy to their patient went into the effect. I'm sure a lot of this is not new news, but these are all building towards a world where each patient can have control of their own health data, and only then it can be private, secure, interoperable, and can be utilized in a way that maximizes the health empowerment among patients. So I look forward to that day. I hope others do as well.
Yeah, and I'd endorse that in the last minute. I think there's something for me that says, let's make sure that we encourage patients not just to focus on their rights, but also their responsibilities. How do we encourage citizens to take more responsibility for their health where they are vulnerable and they can't? How do we get society and their communities to support them to do that? What I don't want to see necessarily is that digital literacy becomes yet another widening health inequalities issue. So we need to be careful with that. We also here in the UK, a study was just done that, 1 million people have to choose every evening whether to put, food on the table or whether to buy data for their phones or whatever. So there are issues not just in terms of literacy, but also in terms of data poverty. So for me, I think there's something about let's make sure that we really do reach people. And for those who don't want to be digitally literate for whatever reason, let's make sure we support them. We did work many, many years ago with the traveler community, and for their societal reasons did not want to be connected. So we created a paper-based record that they carried around in a waterproof folder. And when they went to see healthcare, they brought this record with them. So let's also make sure that, in moving to digital and real-world evidence and all the rest of it, we take everybody with us, including those who perhaps still want some more traditional methods.